So, for a few weeks, we are going to have exactly the same lessons that the kids are going to have downstairs. So, that gives parents and kids an opportunity to talk about that lesson, because there's a small chance that I'll say something different than they say down there, because they're addressing a different age group. But still, it gives you a common conversation for you to have about what the lesson was. And so we're jointly going to study the teachings of Jesus for a few weeks. And so that's a bit of a departure from our usual topics. And so Follow Me certainly is a wonderful song to sing. Not to mention, I really like it. Thank you. Okay, so last Wednesday night, Life of Prayer started. If any of you would like to take, there would be 4 more weeks to go on Wednesday night right here downstairs. We invite you to take the Life of Prayer class. This is actually the same that's taught at Unity Village. So if you wanted SEE credit for this, that would be possible, but it's also an opportunity for everyone to understand how it is that Unity views prayer, to practice how Unity prays, and to come to a deeper understanding of that. So if you're interested in the Life of Prayer class and you would like to join, Bill Egan is teaching. I hear you had a great class Wednesday night. My spies told me it was good. And there are books available in the back, should you like to teach that. You want to say anything else about that, Bill? We're having fun. Okay, so they're having fun and they're praying at the same time. If those two concepts are a little foreign to you, I invite you to take this class. Okay. All right, the kids are going to go with Miss Sue and have some... Not you. Oh, Miss Alicia. Excuse me. I thought it was her. Nope, it's Alicia. Okay. So, they're going to hear about Jesus when he was 12. Just kind of like you guys, huh? Okay. So isn't it interesting that we all became Christians? How do you take a Jewish teacher who's teaching teachings from the Hebrew Bible and develop something called Christianity? How does that happen? Interesting, isn't it? Because Jesus never, ever, for 1/2 second in his whole life, was a Christian. Not right until the very end. He was Jewish. And so it's an interesting world that we live in that created Christianity from what Jesus was trying to teach us. So as we look at what Jesus taught, notice that we aren't, in this particular experience, going to look at what Paul taught. Because the Christianity that is taught in most churches is actually based on the teachings of Paul rather than the teachings of Jesus. And so when we look at what was Jesus teaching, what was he trying to tell us, what was the reason that we have still, over 2,000 years later, why are we still talking about this guy? What was it that he was trying to tell us that it seems as though only now, in the late 20th and the early 21st century, are we actually starting to focus more on what Jesus taught and less on what was said about Jesus? So except for being born, we really don't hear much about Jesus. We know when he's 2 years old, his parents go to pay taxes, which has really gotten morphed into part of the Christmas story. So we leave him there. And then he doesn't reappear until he's 12 years old. And I'm actually going to read from the Bible to you. I know, take a deep breath. You'll be okay. My friend, Reverend Gary Simmons, always says, if you have a hairball, just cough it up, So if Jesus is the hairball for you, just cough it up and, we'll be happy to wipe it up and it'll be okay, because we're we're going to look at what Jesus has to say to us, as opposed to what has been said about Jesus. So this story is told to us in Luke 2:41 through 52, and this is from the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible. It says, "Now every year his parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of Passover." Did you hear why he was going to Jerusalem? He's going for Passover. He wasn't going for Easter. He was going for Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up as usual for the festival. When the festival was ended, they started to return, and the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. But his parents didn't know it. So, just imagine that you've gone to a fair, and all of a sudden, a day later, you notice that Colin and Micah are not with you. You didn't notice before, but you have to remember there were a bunch of people. They were walking. People walked at different paces. So it wasn't as odd as it sounds to our ears when our children can't be gone from our sight for more than 2 or 3 seconds without we're afraid for them. So his parents didn't know it. They assumed he was in the group of travelers. They had gone a day's journey. Then they started to look for him among their relatives and friends. And when they didn't find for him, they returned to Jerusalem to search for him. So now we've got 2 days that he was missing. After 3 days, so that means 3 days later, so they didn't just run off to the temple and think, I'm sure Jesus is in the temple, talking to rabbis, teaching. No, that wasn't what they thought. So, after 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking questions. Now, what I can tell you after having been a minister for approaching 20 years now, that what's more important to me is the questions people ask. Because the questions people ask reveal the depth of their understanding. So you get a really good idea by listening to what people ask you of where they are, where they're coming from, what information they're after. You know, it really tells you a whole lot if you're a teacher and you listen to your students. Even when I taught 6th grade, when there was a room full of kids, and I had about 25 kids in the class when I taught 6th grade, the kids who ask questions were the ones who were interested, involved, part of that process. So, okay, so we have an idea of what they're describing to us as the kind of guy Jesus was. All who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. So they're suggesting not only was he asking questions, but he was answering. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. You know, we had a class that we were doing, it was downstairs. Maybe it was Integral Christianity. And Colin, he's not here today, and Joy, Thatcher and Joy. Thatcher was there. And I was shocked. And Nancy's smiling by the questions he asked. So he appeared to have been playing on an electronic device the whole time. I didn't think he was listening to anything. But when, near the end of the class, he asked a question, it was apparent to me that he had listened to every word that was said. So, but Joy, his grandma, was a bit astonished at the question that he asked. So when Jesus' parents, when Mary and Joseph saw him, they were astonished, and his mother said to him, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Look, your father and I have been searching for you in great anxiety." Can you imagine how upset you would be with your child that you'd been looking for now for 5 days? You might be a tad cranky. The other thing that you have to consider in this equation, though, is that a 12-year-old 2,000 years ago was much more mature. You know, they were given more responsibility. They had, that would be the age of what we now call a bar mitzvah, right? So we're assuming Jesus was a little more mature than we think of necessarily as a 12-year-old. Why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been searching for you in great anxiety. And he said, why were you searching for me? Didn't you know that I must be in my Father's house? They didn't understand what he said to them. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. His mother treasured all these things in her heart. So you can imagine what the lesson is downstairs. But what you get to think about is, what is obedience? Is obedience blindly acquiescing to everything that you are taught and told? Or is obedience really to question what you are taught and told? The key part of that question is, to whom or to what are you supposed to be obedient? So if you were looking at this from what you know about Jesus' teaching, what you know about what he came to say, who's he telling us to be obedient to? Brian's busy Googling obedient over here. He's going to have something wise to tell us any minute now. But you're allowed to talk to me without Googling. What is obedience? Who are we, let's put it that way, who are we required to be obedient to? Okay, our I am. What does that mean?
Our God self, our true self, our expanded self, that which part of us which is connected to the divine.
So, obedient to the divine within us doesn't mean the rabbis in the temple. And those of you who've lived a day or two, I'm guessing, have not always been obedient to what your parents taught you. Just a guess on the outhand side that some of you may have deviated a bit from what your parents taught you. So if we want to look for obedience, if we want to look for who and what Jesus could have been saying to us, he's quoted as saying in Matthew 6:33, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you." So one more time, you get to look. Is that God up there, or is that God in here? And it's a totally different connotation if you're learning to listen, to be obedient to yourself. Some of you know from the classes that I've taught, the biggest trick in being obedient to yourself is what?
Knowing yourself.
You have to know yourself. And besides the phrase knowing yourself, you also have to know who you are and what it is you want. It's impossible to be obedient to your own inner guidance, your own divine self, when you don't really have an answer to that question. So as Jesus was in the temple, he was expanding his own inner awareness of who he was, of what it meant to be a Jew, of what it meant to study and learn and grow. We assume that prior to this time, as the obedient son of a carpenter, he was learning to be a carpenter. Not much about being a carpenter, that trade, learning that skill, is about wisdom, is about knowledge, is about an inner development of himself. So when Jesus says to his parents, I have to be about my Father's business, he doesn't mean his father Joseph. He means his own inner divine self. I have to be about my business. I know that you're a carpenter. And I honor and love and respect you as a carpenter. And it's a useful trade. But that's not who I am. That's not what I'm about. So the question becomes, how can we do what we need to do while honoring others' needs? Parents obviously need us to be present. Parents need us to be respectful. You know, there are needs that go with a family dynamic that are required. So how do you honor a family dynamic? How do you honor what you've been taught? How do you honor the values that you grew up with while at the exact same time being true to yourself? Suddenly the question's not so easy. Suddenly the question becomes complicated because in growing up, you developed your own set of beliefs, your own standards. And if they're different from your parents, how can you honor your parents and honor your own experience, your own needs? Pretty much the answer to that is we have to respect each other. And that's a two-way street. And it's quite possible that downstairs they're going to talk about this exact same thing, since I took those words exactly from the lesson that the teachers are teaching downstairs. How do you do what we need while honoring others' words? And how do you respect somebody's ideas that are different from yours while still honoring yourself? That can be more than a rhetorical question. It can be an exploration, should you choose to accept that assignment. It can be an exploration of, these are my parents' values. This is what I learned from my family, from my cultural environment as a child. This is what I learned. At the same time, you've also been exposed to many other things. Perhaps spouses, perhaps your education, perhaps teachers, perhaps just the media culture. So you acquire other values. And then somewhere in the midst of your values and the values you've acquired, you come to this true north. This place of, this is what I value, and this is what I stand for, and this is what my life's work is. In other words, that's part of what Jesus was communicating in the temple, that there are things I've come here to do, and they're different than just being a carpenter. And so as we watch our own children grow, as we watch our grandchildren grow, we realize, with the words of Khalil Gibran, I was just telling Dave this morning out in the lobby, we were talking about something else, but Khalil Gibran, in a child blessing ceremony, I said these words to you 6 years ago about, your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but they are not of you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts. For they dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. So the same thing was true 2,000 years ago. What Mary and Joseph were trying to teach Jesus was certainly valuable, but it wasn't the world he was going to live in. And so throughout the New Testament, you constantly see Jesus talking to his family, leaving his family, saying, hey, I can't do this. I have to go and do what I've been called to do. And that's our opportunity ourselves. What are we called to do? How do we do it while honoring and respecting our parents? The other relevant question is, where are you looking for God? That's the basic unity question. Very first principle. God is all there is. God is divine love. God is present within us. That doesn't mean we've been taken over and inhabited. It simply means that what is divine in this world is present right here. You don't have to look someplace else for it. You simply have to look within. So because unity does metaphysical Bible interpretation, you can also look at this story metaphysically. Is it interesting to you that Jesus was 12? When the writers of the Jewish tradition write, there weren't accidents. You have to remember they're probably not recounting a literal history. So why did they make Jesus 12? So then you look at what does the number 12 mean metaphysically? It means inner wholeness. So when you reach that spot of inner wholeness, that place of knowing within yourself who you are, then you can pursue whatever knowledge is important to you. It's also not an accident that they found him in the temple, because temple metaphysically is the place where we honor our inner spirit as we develop spiritual maturity. Doesn't matter that my hair's this color. That doesn't guarantee wisdom, doesn't guarantee spiritual maturity. Spiritual maturity is a goal that we work towards within ourselves, to be spiritually whole. To be about our Father's business, we must be following our own inner spirit, our own inner guidance. It's our inner wisdom that we follow, not the teachings and expectations of the outer world. So the boy Jesus in the temple was, metaphysically speaking, going into himself to discern and discover what was his to do. Who am I? What is my call? What is my path? When I first walked into a Unity church in 1987, the word call was pretty distressful for me because I was raised Southern Baptist, and so if I was going to be called, I was pretty sure I was going to have to go and be a missionary in Africa. That's who came to my little church and talked all the time, was missionaries from somewhere else. So the word call was a little scary to me. But the word call doesn't have to have anything to do even with a spiritual teaching, a spiritual learning. Your call is your own spiritual gifts, your own guidance, your own talent, your own ability to discern who is Sue, who is Gavin, who is Sharon, who is Bill. Who am I? What have I come here to do? What is it that excites me? What is it that gets me feeling passionate? Because nobody's ever been called to do something that they're not passionate about. So we all have a calling. We just tend to think in terms of carpentry. We think we have to have a trade. We think we have to earn money. And the truth is, yes, we do. That's an important aspect. And sometimes our calling and our career mesh. And when that happens, perfect. And sometimes our calling is our hobby, our choice of how we spend our free time. So, and then as you discover that calling, as you know clearly who you are, who you've meant to be, maybe your calling and your career will mesh, and maybe they will always be parallel, but you then find that place within you where you are divinely happy. You know, the guys come because we pay them, but they also come because they love music. They love to play. They love to give of themselves, give of their talent, and that's sharing their gift with the world. So, what's your talent? Sometimes your talent is a private inner talent. You know, again, Dave and I were talking about a computer geek, if I could, and the fact that sitting at a computer screen with a mouse and all these other attributes, maybe that's your gift. So it might not be interacting. It might not be public speaking. It might not be any of those things. But discerning your call is that place of wholeness. And it doesn't come from outside. It only can come from within you, from your own inner guidance, from your own inner spirit. And if you have to stay behind or go ahead of your parents, sometimes that becomes your work. So I invite you to join us in moving into the stillness.
In the stillness of this moment, there is peace, there is peace. In the stillness of this moment, there is peace, there is peace. And I rest and trust and breathe and know that in the stillness of this moment, there is peace.
Inviting you to take a deep breath and let it out. Again, breathing in and breathing out. Allowing the bird song outside the building, the soft notes, to guide you into your own inner temple. That place of wholeness that only you can access. The wisdom, the knowing, breathing in and allowing that to simply bubble up from within you. Being lost in your own inner sanctum. Breathing and simply noticing what it is that's coming to you. No matter who you came with, no matter what their experience is, what is truly of prime importance is your own inner spirit experience of the divine. Breathing and noticing what arises on the mirror of your mind. What inspires you? What excites you? Seek ye first the kingdom of God. Seek ye first your own inner knowing, and all of these things will be added unto you. Peace, contentment, compassion, love, wisdom, strength. Well up from that inner source of the divine. When you are following your inner guidance, when you are resting in this place of perfect knowing, perfect wholeness, from that place, you find the respect, the honor for the wisdom that your parents shared, while at the same time, you're creating a separate path for yourself, the one that is uniquely yours. Until you bring your light from under a bushel, until you bloom and share your gift. The world is a sadder place because there's only one you. You are unique and special and divine. Jesus came to teach us the things he discovered himself, that he knew was in each of us, for each of us to discover about ourselves. So we take a deep breath and we move into the stillness, simply to listen. Our own inner temple. The quiet place. The sanctuary. The Holy of Holies. In the Jewish tradition, only the high priest could go to the Holy of Holies. What we know is that only you can go to your Holy of Holies. Only your I am can have that experience. So we rest and we trust and we know that it's there. And that as we connect to that truth and that path that is ours, life becomes easier and simpler and joyous. Because we're following our bliss. So for the divine guidance which lies within, we are grateful and we say thank you. Thank you, God. And so it is. Amen. Please join in singing in the stillness.
In the stillness of this moment, I feel love, I feel love. In the stillness of this moment, I feel love, I feel love. And I rest and trust and breathe and know that in the stillness of this moment, I feel love. In the stillness of this moment, I am peace, I am peace. In the stillness of this moment, I am peace, I am peace. And I rest and trust and breathe and know that in the stillness of this moment, I am peace, I am love. I am peace, I am love.